Randy Pitchford is not the most reliable man in the world. In fact, he's one of this industry's premier bullshitters. But if he can be relied upon for one thing, it's throwing a bit of a tantrum because he thinks that games media is out to get him, which is exactly what he did following the gameplay reveal for Borderlands 3, where he said the game would have no microtransactions, but then it turned out the game would have microtransactions. Now, before we go any further, let me state that I do not believe, in this instance, Randy Pitchford was lying. Exactly. I think he's displaying a symptom of the continued pushing of excess with video game monetization, in the definition of microtransaction changes to scale with the abusiveness of the monetization practice. So in our minds, we've gotten so used to things like loot boxes and pay-to-win items being tied to microtransactions that I think some of us do really feel that anything less than that isn't a microtransaction anymore, which is a problem in and of itself, but we will get to that part of the discussion. But I do just want to front load this video by saying, in this instance, I think what's more likely is Randy got it wrong. However, his subsequent Twitter rant afterwards is, well, let's just say he himself blew things out of proportion while trying to accuse others of blowing things out of proportion, to the point where his reaction has made this a bigger story than it otherwise would, or maybe even should be. Now, after the much hyped gameplay reveal for Borderlands 3, Randy Pitchford closed the presentation out by saying, quite literally, there would be no microtransactions in Borderlands 3. He said there's going to be no microtransactions, none of that nonsense, and he did lump it in with concepts like loot boxes and pay-to-win and free-to-play economies. Now, I can play you exactly what he said, so we will do that now. Here is what Randy said, and it's really not ambiguous. He literally said, no microtransactions.
And I'm sure we're going to do all kinds of fun customizations like heads and skins, but we're not doing any of that free-to-play junk. There's not going to be any microtransactions. There's not going to be any of that nonsense.
Sounds great. Problem is, Borderlands 3 literally does have microtransactions. They are cosmetic microtransactions, so the just cosmetic crowd can say it's just cosmetic, but what you can't say is that they're not microtransactions. They are. It's been confirmed that cosmetic microtransactions are in the game, and cosmetic microtransactions are, as the name might suggest, microtransactions. Producer Chris Brock tried to clarify what Randy Pitchford said, adding, when we say no microtransactions, what we're really trying to say is that we're not trying to nickel and dime people. Chris, that's not the definition of microtransaction, mate. We'll probably make content after launch that we will sell, but we also don't intend to take what Borderlands was and then chop it up into chunks and sell it. Now, before we get on to Randy's tantrum, I really want to tackle this because I'm alarmed at seeing an industry attempt to move the goalposts and redefine words. The industry is quite clearly ashamed of microtransactions. It's at least ashamed of the negative publicity that follows their inclusion in a game, to the point where many game publishers don't even want to say the word microtransaction anymore. They like to say recurrent user spending, a pretty weak bit of corporate speak that desperately tries to avoid saying the dirty word. With that in mind, I'm actually a bit more annoyed at Chris Brock than I would be at Randy Pitchford in this situation, because Brock's the one who compounded the issue and is deliberately giving a false impression of what a microtransaction is. If you have these little fucking transactions in your game, be it an XP booster, be it a pay-to-win gun, be it a loot box, be it a skin for your character or your vehicle, they're all microtransactions. Some of them are less egregious than others. Some of them are more benign, but they are all microtransactions. And in my opinion, my personal opinion, I don't think they have any place in any video game, regardless of their implementation. But your intent with a microtransaction does not define what a microtransaction is. You can say you're not trying to nickel and dime people, but that says a lot more about how the industry has approached microtransactions than it does about you or your implementation of them. If you have them in your game, you have them in your game. Microtransactions form part of a business model. They're not an intention. They're not a declaration of intent. They are what they are. microtransactions are microtransactions. And I'm gonna push back on attempts to move goalposts and redefine what a microtransaction is, because the game industry loves that crap. Loves to push the envelope so far and hard and then scale things back, so the old bullshit they were pulling doesn't quite look so much like bullshit anymore. Well no, Borderlands 3 has microtransactions in it. Randy Pitchford said there'll be none of that nonsense, but a bit of that nonsense is in the game. Anyway, Game Informer called Randy Pitchford out on this, and the Gearbox CEO started behaving like a fuck ape in response. Game Informer tweeted a link to their article stating, despite Gearbox CEO Randy Pitchford's comment about no microtransactions in Borderlands 3 during today's livestream, we've been told cosmetic items are still purchasable. That's all they said in the tweet there. Ol Randers replied with, "Come on guys, shitty clickbait headline. Literally seconds before I said that, I made it very clear we're going to do more cosmetic stuff like we did in Borderlands 2. You know I was talking about premium currency and loot boxes kind of stuff, not being in our game." He followed that up with, "Why you guys would fuck me on this is beyond me. Thanks a lot."
He was trying to fuck on me.
He then went on to tweet for like 10,000 years about the situation and painted himself as the victim who has been mischaracterized as a liar, though personally I would not define that as a mischaracterization. Maybe a mischaracterization of what was said here, if indeed people did accuse him of lying, which Game Informer did not do. But let's face facts here. Randy Pitchford has earned himself no trust after the Aliens Colonial Marines debacle, which I'm sure he thinks is so old news we shouldn't bring it up anymore. The man has a well-earned reputation as a bullshitter. I still charge that he lied to my fucking face during an interview about Aliens Colonial Marines. The man's been caught fudging the facts one too many times. He does not deserve an iota of trust. Randy Pitchford is not a liar for saying microtransactions would not be in Borderlands 3, but Randy Pitchford is, nonetheless, a liar. This is something Randy Pitchford likes to do. He likes to paint himself the victim. He has accused me in the past of having a boner for him. Oh no, sorry, it was a hard-on for him. I don't want to mischaracterize Randy Pitchford, but he likes to talk to interviewers about my erect penis.
It's just dishonest.
Yeah.
It just feels unfair. I remember, what's the name of that guy? He's the journalist guy. His thing is he's always mad. He's a big dude. He's got a British accent. He's got a hard on for me. I can't remember that guy. It's raw. It just feels unfair.
He's talked multiple times about the agenda I have against him, while at the same time pretending he's forgotten my name, even though he literally knows who I am. I think it's some desperate attempt on his part to look like he's above taking pot shots while at the same time taking pot shots. I personally am not above that. I'll gladly take any pot shot at Randy Pitchford that the universe wants to toss my way. I'm a vindictive, petty little bastard, but unlike Randy Pitchford, I'm a petty, vindictive little bastard who will actually admit it. In the past, he's lashed out at Eurogamer. That was because Game Informer was going to have the exclusive reveal of Borderlands 2, but Eurogamer got there first and took the wind out of Game Informer's sails. For that, Randy Pitchford accused Eurogamer of shoddy journalism, even though what Eurogamer did was literally good journalism. They found out some information, they shared some information, even at the risk of pissing off a major publisher. That's good journalism. To call it shoddy, that really shines a light on how Randy Pitchford views games media, and it's something the game industry overall has an issue with, seeing games journalism as an outlet for their marketing, for their public relations. And I gotta say, Game Informer's regular exclusive reveal deals certainly muddy those waters. On social media and in interviews, Randy Pitchford loves to throw little pity parties for himself, talking about how unfairly maligned he is, how everyone thinks he's a liar, but he's never apologised for the lies he's told. And in this situation especially, he's made a complete mountain out of a molehill. He knee-jerked a victim position for himself as an immediate response to Game Informer, simply simply clarifying what he said. Now look, it's good that Borderlands 3 has not succumbed to the temptation to become a live service. So many of these live services take the form of looter shooters. That's what they've started to be called now. Games like Anthem and Destiny and all that. And Borderlands 3 proudly touts itself as part of a series that's deemed the original looter shooter. So with that in mind, Borderlands 3 is so ripe for exploitation and abuse that it is somewhat impressive that Gearbox has resisted what I'm sure was intense pressure to carve the game to pieces and turn it into a live service. Doing so would have ruined the game. It would have gone entirely against the spirit of the game, like the stupid weapon crafting microtransactions system in Dead Space 3. Now, major game publishers don't give a shit about the integrity of a game or what makes it good. They only care about what can we sell within this game. How can we turn it into a vector for monetization? So the fact that Gearbox is rigidly sticking to the core of what makes Borderlands good is, well, it is itself good. Pitchford thinks he was clear in his statement about what is and isn't in Borderlands 3, but he simply wasn't. He's gonna have to really, understand what is clear and what isn't, like he could do with understanding the difference between the truth and a fiction he's pulled out of his arse. So anyway, it's good that Borderlands 3 will not be succumbing to complete and total video game industry greed. But Randy Pitchford just someone take the shovel out of his bloody hands.
He's got a hard on.